Well, good morning, everybody. I will say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening as we come to you live across 3 time zones. And in spite of a little technical glitch this morning, we had some wonderful rain last night here in Southern California, which knocked out my internet. So I'm on my phone speaking with you, and that happens sometimes, but I'm delighted to talk with the 3 of you this morning. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to talk about our season, Musica Angelica, and of course, period instrument Baroque orchestra. So I'm going to start with some introductions of each of our guests this morning, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about our season very briefly, and then we're going to dive into some questions. So I'd like to start with Martin Haselböck. Martin is firmly established in the international music scene. His intensive involvement with the repertoire of classical church music as part of his work as a court organist was the beginning of a conducting career and prompted him to find the Orchestra Vienna Academy in 1985. Since 2004, he has also been music director of the Musica Angelica Baroque Orchestra. As an opera conductor, he has directed new productions at major festivals and opera houses in Europe, North America, South America, and he has been committed to the Music of France list for many years. He is also the director of the Liszt Academy, and Martin has received numerous awards, such as the Austrian Cross of Honor for Science and the Arts. As a professor formerly at Lübeck University of Music, and now at the University of Music and Performing Arts in Vienna, he is a mentor to a young generation of organists. So welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
Our next guest is born in Chicago and recognized as one of the outstanding harpsichordists of his generation. Jory Vinikour has cultivated a highly diversified career that takes him to the world's most important festivals, concert halls, and opera houses. As a recitalist and concerto soloist, partner to many of today's finest instrumental and vocal artists, coach and conductor. He appears regularly as a harpsichordist at the finest opera houses and festivals in Europe, Paris, Netherlands, Salzburg Festival, Teatro Real de Madrid, Baden-Baden, and Glyndebourne. Jory directed the Korean Chamber Orchestra in an all-Bach program. He has performed with the Hong Kong Philharmonic, Moscow Tchaikovsky Conservatory, and the Orchestra Vienna Academy, and Martin Haselböck for a performance of Poulenc's Concert Champêtre in Vienna's storied Musikverein. He has received 2 Grammy nominations for his recordings. Our next guest, well, let's welcome Jory. Welcome, Jory.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks so much for being with us. Our next guest is South Korean violinist Yu Eun Gemma Kim, who moved to the United States in 2013 to study at the University of Southern California with Midori Goto. She has received numerous awards in recognition for her virtuosity, and last year was the artist in residence for Musica Angelica, where she received standing ovations for her inspired and passionate playing. YeEun is a core member of Delirium Musicum, where she created Music Caravan, a road tour of concerts performed for winemakers, farm workers, and other non-traditional audiences. Music Caravan won the Audience Choice Award of the San Francisco Classical Voice for Best Streaming Series. Her video of Chopin's Nocturne No. 20 on YouTube has received over 12 million views. In addition to Musica Angelica, YeEun performs with the American Bach Soloists, Voices of Music, Boulder Bach Festival, and Blue Hill Bach. So welcome to YeEun. So delighted to have you with us.
Thank you.
And I think it's a little bit late at night for you, if I'm not mistaken. So we really appreciate you staying up.
No worries.
You look very wide awake, though, so that's impressive. Let me give you just a brief overview of the season, and then we'll dive in. For Musica Angelica's 31st season, we will be presenting the superstars of the Baroque era, Bach, Mozart, and Vivaldi. Our opening concerts on September 23rd and 24th, the Bach Boys, will feature compositions of Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Bernhard Bach, C.P.E. Bach, and Wilhelm Friedemann Bach. It's a lot of Bachs. December 9th and 10th, Joy of Christmas, will feature holiday-themed Baroque music from Francesco Manfredini, Giuseppe Sammartini, Johann Adolf Haas, and Michael Correct. January's Happy Birthday Mozart on the 27th and 28th celebrates the composer's 300th birthday with some of his most admired works. And April's Vivaldi Il Veneziano will feature his most famous four seasons in its entirety, together with an oboe concerto, flute concerto, and folio from Trio Sonata in D minor. The season concludes with our non-subscription event, the annual St. Matthew Passion and Bach Festival at First Congregational Church, Los Angeles. So I want to dive in with the first question for Martin. And this is about what we're sort of coming through, which is the pandemic, which we've all survived, thank God. During the pandemic, California alone lost 150,000 jobs in the performing arts sector. Many leading arts organizations are canceling or adjusting their seasons to address this challenge. Additionally, audiences have not returned to pre-pandemic attendance levels. So my question for Martin today is, this season offers music that is well known to fans of the Baroque era and is intended to draw back our audience from the pandemic period. How important do you think it is that we present well-known music as we recover from the pandemic era and work to build our attendance?
Yeah, thank you for this question, Matthew. In some ways, I think it means Musica Angelica, have been operating quite well after the pandemic already. And one of the reasons for me is that we are small enough to have a direct approach to our audience. We can tell our audience, we can ask them, what do you want to hear next season? And the expansion of our audience has to work with a mix of programs. We have to offer them some well-known pieces, but not too much, because otherwise the people say, oh, I have heard this last season, why again the four seasons? So the mixture must be to keep them curious, to tell them, listen, you can trust us, whatever we offer is highest quality, is interesting, is new. And I think what is new after the pandemic, what I see, we have to offer the audience narratives. We have to offer them stories, which means if you play the same pieces again, there has to be something new about the same pieces, either a new flamboyant soloist or a new discovery which you can tell the audience. So what we have tried in our programs is to bring back guests and artists which our audience knows and wants to hear again, to bring back pieces which they want to hear again, but also to offer new faces, new pieces, new music. And I think the mixture is everything.
Very good. That's excellent. Well, it seems as though the audience development and attracting new listeners has never been as important to performing arts organizations like Musica Angelica. And we focused on education and community engagement programming to stimulate interest in our period instrument orchestra, as you know. And we hosted over 300 students at our concerts last year with the hopes of developing their interest and becoming lifelong fans in this music. So my second question for you, Martin, this morning is, last season, in addition to having 300 students join us as our guests, throughout the season, we had over 200 new attendees at our concerts, which I think is very good. What would you say to new audiences that may be interested in hearing a period orchestra, but are deciding whether they should attend or not?
Yeah, sure. I'm sitting here in Austria in the Lake District, and we created a festival after the pandemic, which tries to answer just these questions. We go to places where the audience hasn't been to find new audiences. I found it with Musica Angelica really touching. This one morning in a high school where half of the kids never had seen a violin, where the other half of the kids got already education to play these instruments. And in some ways, this is our audience for tomorrow. And we cannot say that the audience from tomorrow just wants to hear pop and rock and special songs. I experienced it here in Europe in an area which is mixed countryside, but very close to the Salzburg Festival, that you can mix the people who hear the music for the first time and the aficionados, who want to hear the same pieces again. And my big teacher is always Mozart, who has told his father, I'm writing music for the music lover and for the connoisseur. So if music is good enough, the music lover gets beautiful sounds and beautiful songs, and the connoisseur gets every time something new. And we, with the period instruments, we can offer them really new sounds, new approaches, new vitality. And for me, the great thing is I'm looking forward to our next season, because I know already with some of the musicians, and including the ones who are sitting here to talk with you in this panel, we can create something which is really exciting for the audience. And I can say here from Austria that some of these ideas and some of these artists I want to bring here next summer. So I'm working on bringing Musica Angelica next summer to this European festival. So because I think our approach is good, it is right, and is creative enough to get new audiences. And you have seen it last season, and I hope still to expand even more with finding new people in our concert halls and in our places. Yeah.
And that's wonderful. Well, I think that there's certainly an interest in hearing the purity of the sound of a period instrument orchestra and the difference that that may make in their experience too. So I'm going to move along a little bit here, and I'm going to move to Jory next with a couple of questions. Since Musica Angelica's founding in 1993, Baroque orchestras, ensembles, and festivals and performers appear to have expanded here in the US. Compared to 30 years ago, it seems that more musicians are trained to play period instruments, and that an interest in period instrument Baroque music by fans and new listeners is taking place. So my question for Jory this morning is, as a noted international harpsichordist, you have played in many of the world's finest concert halls to very receptive audiences. Additionally, as an advocate for historically informed performance practice and expanding access to world-class performances of early music, you are in a unique position to reflect on period instrument playing here in the United States. Do you believe the appreciation and audience for this type of performance is growing in the US? And what is contributing, to the interest in this type of performance?
It's a fabulous question. So I think I'm a rather perfect age and place in my life to have observed a real growth in that. I studied in the United States up until about 1990, and even as a harpsichord pupil in New York, it was kind of a rarity. Went to Paris in 1990, discovered a more flourishing early music scene, not necessarily yet at the biggest schools in Paris, but over those decades, that's 3 decades and change, going back to the United States, of course, there's been an exponential growth in interest in early music. I'm looking at YeEun, who I heard 5 years ago at USC, brilliant violinist. And, would I have heard a musician like that back in 1990? In other words, one of the top violinists in a big American conservatory, but also fascinated with Baroque violin. I'm not sure. I do think that this fascination with period instruments is a thing that has very organically appeared among young musicians. I think we're all avid, we're all greedy for new sounds, new experiences, and early music has actually filled that need very well for many of us.
That's wonderful, thank you. So in introducing Musica Angelica to the first-time listener, I often present the idea that playing on a period instrument or replicas thereof is the way the composer intended us to hear this music, as it presents a purity of sound that can't be achieved perhaps on more contemporary instruments. This obviously requires that the acoustics in the venue in which we perform be compatible with the orchestra to ensure that we achieve that purity of sound. So my question for you this morning is that our orchestra typically benefits from performing in a church or other such setting where there is an appropriate acoustical environment. How important is the venue to the enjoyment of this music? And are there places where it should be heard and places where it should not?
That's another wonderful question. And I want to backtrack a little bit into your question when you speak of purity of sound. Yes, many of us are scholars as well. I don't necessarily consider myself as such, but when we speak about the purity of sound, I think we're speaking about painting with the same materials, let's say, as the painter, in other words, the composer in this case, hopefully achieving something that the composer would recognize. Now, that would lead me right into the venues. Well, over the course of our lives and careers, we can become very spoiled about our venues. Martin Haselböck, for instance, has played a kind of great role in my musical life for now, I think about 21 years. One day I'm going to sit Martin down with a drink and discuss this exactly. And with Martin, some of our experience hasn't been exactly period instrument. So I've performed with Martin in one of the great acoustic spaces on the planet, the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, about 6-7 years ago. And for a modern, so-called modern orchestra playing Julius Caesar of Handel, the acoustic was rather phenomenal. The beauty of the place, the aesthetic beauty of the place is unmatchable. So, well, there's a hall with 4,000 some odd seats, surely much, much, much more than anything we might have known in the Baroque time. And it was perfect. And yet you can play also in some municipal hall of 400 seats, and it feels utterly inappropriate to it. So there are many, many factors at play. I think another Martin experience that I had playing in the Musikverein in Vienna, I played, as you mentioned, Poulenc Concert Champêtre. Well, the Musikverein, you could hear a pin drop. Martin could have done a small chamber music program with period instruments, with Baroque. The program we played was quite large, going from Poulenc to Franz Liszt to Bizet l'Arlésienne, also perfect. So I hope you don't think I'm talking around your question, but we're always looking for beautiful spaces. These spaces can be beautiful acoustically, they can be hopefully beautiful or appealing or inspiring or compelling aesthetically. And yes, of course, the venue in which one gathers, in which the public gathers to hear music, it's an important factor. And I think everybody, all organizations attempt to find that space which welcomes the audience and a space to which the audience wishes to come.
Well, it's certainly amazing that some of these wonderful venues in Europe that we salivate when we see them, they're so beautiful, but they're also acoustically excellent, and it's kind of an amazing thing that you have a very, much more historically significant building. But, perhaps that was the intent, and acoustics were not invented in the 20th century. So we know that...
If I may interrupt, I think we have, even for Musica Angelica audiences, we have great venues, and we have venues with great acoustics. We can play St. Matthew Passion in a room which has the same size as the original St. Thomas Church of Bach, where he played it, and probably the same sound. And I think, since we're talking about period instruments, I think the aura, what we call the feeling, I'm an organist from basic profession, and when you play on an instrument where you know that great G.S. Bach has put his fingers down on the same keys, you have kind of feelings which you cannot describe. And we were able to record all the Beethoven symphonies in the concert halls where he himself had conducting them. So I think this combination of feelings with authenticity is something very special. But in the end, we are all artists, and we have to be perfect, and we have to make music, and we have to make music to sound well. Yeah, and yes, this is finally the business. Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't hurt to be inspired. I'm going to move on to YeEun now, since we're keeping her up rather late tonight for her. So I want to talk about the traditional audience for Baroque and classical music tends to be an older demographic. Yet it is evident that younger audiences must be developed to perpetuate the art form. Marketing and promoting a period instrument Baroque orchestra to a younger and more diverse constituency requires some creativity and skill in both attracting and retaining new listeners. So my question today for YeEun is this: is that you have utilized some very creative approaches in bringing historically informed Baroque music to new audiences, including your Music Caravan tour. How do you feel we best attract a younger, more diverse audience to this music, and how do we keep them engaged?
Well, maybe I can explain a little bit about Music Caravan for people who don't know about Music Caravan. It was my COVID project. So during the pandemic, when all the venues are closed, and I and my partner Etienne, we traveled in 1971 VW bus. We found a really cute bus, and then we painted in red and white, and we named it Boris. So doing a van life was our dream, but we couldn't do it as a musician because we had to be at a certain place, a certain time all the time. But pandemic was perfect timing to do that. So we decided to leave home, and then we didn't know when we were gonna come back. And we ended up traveling from the Mexican border to Canadian border for 6 months.
Wow.
My mom was like, when are you going home every day? And I was like, I don't know. But yeah, you ended up being on the road for 6 months, and then we brought music to people or not people, some animals who want to hear us or who don't want to hear us. We just play whoever we meet on the road, and that was quite an experience. We met like so many different kinds of people from left to the right, and a lot of farmers and loggers and winemakers. Most of them, they never heard of classical music before. Live performances mostly, because they're farmer, they have to make their vegetables happy and then going to the concerts. But like, of course, their favorite was Vivaldi. We play Vivaldi's 2 violin concertos and stuff, and it doesn't sound like Baroque music for them. It sounds like rock music. So everyone was like screaming and dancing with us. And we have those videos online as musiccaravan.com. But anyway, I felt like those people who we met on the road and we play for them, and they became such a fan of us. Now they actually come, like drive all the way from very far to listen to our regular concerts. So they became a really classical music fan. So I felt like they just didn't have an opportunity to, have experience classical music. And that's important that we make people experience as much as possible. And maybe people have some wrong image about classical or Baroque music, maybe, but once they realize it's very welcoming, like what I experienced, or unintimidating, or it's fun, when they realize that, I think people will be able to come to the concert halls.
Well, you made the music very accessible. And it strikes me with music, the universal language of music is about emotions and about feelings, and not so much about the intellect, and I think that's where it probably resonates. So it's just delightful to hear that you just took to the road, you took the music directly to places and people that were never exposed to it, which I think is tremendous. So I want to talk a little bit now about, the support for the performing arts is, very competitive in this day and age. And we all kind of compete for corporate foundation and public funding for the arts, which seems to be focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And so with an ever-growing number of international Baroque artists, such as yourself, performing on period instruments, the creative community of musicians seems to reflect this growing diversity of players. Additionally, audiences seem to be more inclusive of a wide range of age and ethnicity. So as the players become more diverse, it seems like the audience is getting a little bit more diverse. So my question for you, YeEun, today is, in your opinion, how can a Baroque orchestra better market itself to a new generation of listeners? And do you believe that community engagement programming, because you've done some of this yourself, home concerts, community concerts, things like that, can positively impact this trend?
Totally, yes. That's very important, I think. And maybe we need a new platform to reach young generations and new audiences. For example, maybe I don't know, for young people, we make a concert for only for young people, let's say like under 35, but we make like concerts a little late night so that people feel more comfortable coming. Doesn't feel like coming to a classical concert, but going for a, little hang, right? Something like that. And also I think, like Martin said before, some kind of storytelling around the Baroque music, which we can make a lot of things that could help too. And intimate setting like house concerts will build like personal connection and develop better understanding. And I think usually people are already interested in when they notice different appearance of these Baroque instruments. They are so curious about it already. After our every concert, after the concert, every audience come up to the stage, right? And then they always look at the harpsichord, how beautiful it is.
When you have the orbo
Yeah, they are very interested in. So, and also, as a young generation, I post some like videos and reels on social media, and I see a lot of comments, people asking like, "Oh, what are these little paintings on your violin? Or is your fingerboard, why is the fingerboard wider or shorter? And how could you play lower G on your G string? Like, how could you play lower than G string? Because people hear that the tuning is a little different. So, and I feel like they really want to learn more. And maybe that could be the key to bring more young people or different generation, even younger kids, to this Baroque music. And also I experienced, like I played this Locatelli's very virtuosic piece last year with Musica Angelica, and I'm sure it was a very eye-opening for everyone. Like people didn't know that kind of music exists in Baroque era, and I was shocked too. It was like, where am I going? It was going very high. So like introducing those kind of virtuosic pieces maybe also could bring a lot of people's attraction, and and I think those things will attract audience and make them discover very unlimited possibility of Baroque music.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, it does seem like the younger audience doesn't have this preconceived notion about the music, that you have to have a certain kind of intellect to enjoy it, or you have to know about the era, or you have to know about the composers. They take to it as kind of an emotional response. They hear it and they respond to it emotionally. So it seems like a very, very important thing that we all do, is that we pay attention to that younger audience and engaging them, because in a way that's audience development in its kind of purest form when we're playing for the younger listeners. So I'm going to throw out a couple of questions to all of you, and I'll let you dive in as you wish to, and whoever wants to go first here. But last season, Musica Angelica presented a concert that featured the music of George Friedrich Handel and Jimi Hendrix. This musical fusion attracted new audiences, but also received some pushback from our longtime patrons. How important is it to push the creative envelope in attracting new audiences? And is there a danger of alienating longtime subscribers and patrons? And that's for anybody that wants to take it.
Well, Martin should probably say. I have opinions, but I'm not sure how well informed they are. I find this intriguing from time to time. And there is, of course, it's a bit tenuous and anecdotal, but the wonderful Hendrix-Handel connection. I played at the Handel House in London, and there's some little Hendrix information too. And people still tell about Hendrix sitting with his legs outside the window, playing like the famous Saraband in D minor. And, of course, the man was another type of musical genius. But I think for your audiences, and then I really I should let YeEun and Martin speak, if there's a bit of pushback, fine, but as long as then that kind of envelope pushing isn't a steady diet, but once in a while, people occasionally need to get a little bit shocked. But the question is, then don't shock them year round, every concert.
Great.
And that I think quality is everything, because I think even in pop music, we have a few where it's very easy to adapt. I would say Sting would be one of the persons where you could say he's inspiring baroque composers, but he is so good that I saw him sitting in a concert in Salzburg last week. So he came to the classical music concerts. So he is connected already. And I think just the highest quality, like with everything. It's just when we do that, then the story has to be right and the quality has to be right. And quite often we classical musicians are not as good in recreating music from this totally different genre. I tried when I was young to do a lot of jazz playing, and finally I gave up because all these true jazz players were so much better. So it's worth it. And I think we should offer new things. And when we remember some of the last seasons, we had some wild performances, especially when we did opera. I remember some things which we did together with Long Beach Opera, where the Purcell productions we did were absolutely combining two different worlds. And so, yeah, but we should continue for sure. We should offer connections, but I don't like this idea of crossover, because crossover is always telling the audience classical music is too hard for you, let's soften it, and this is not true at all. I think
or that the other music isn't good enough to stand on its own. There's a bad feedback in both directions, that the rock music isn't good enough just to be itself. It needs to be a little bit classicized, and the classical music isn't accessible enough.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate your answers. And YeEun, do you have any thoughts on that fusion of music?
Yeah, I personally was in that concert with Jimmy and Handel. I personally very enjoyed it because, it's fun. And I agree that it has to be right and well presented and high quality. I think we did a pretty good job. The tricky part was, we were playing on a pretty instruments that has limited volume, and we had some drumsticks there, and some had to be, they had to use mics and stuff. But I thought overall it was very well done. And always pushing the limit is a good thing, and getting inspired from others is a great thing. So I think we should continue doing that highest quality.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, there's certainly a moment in that concert, as I recall, that it was a lovely moment when the Baroque orchestra and the rock quartet were kind of jamming together. And there was a lovely period of time where you could hear sort of everything. And then, of course, the rock and roll sort of drowned out the Baroque because of the sheer volume of it. So those are maybe considerations for the future, but certainly something I think we'll want to consider doing. So I'm going to dive into another question for all of you now that I think is near and dear to all of us, which is that Musica Angelica conducted a number of education and community engagement activities last year, including classroom site visits. And I know YeEun, you did one with us at the beginning of our season. Greatly appreciate that. We also had master classes. We hosted K through 12 and university music students at our concerts. We also hosted 2 high school orchestras at our annual gala, and we were the entity that performed at the Music Teachers Association of California Baroque Festival and Student Music Competition. So my question for all of you this morning and this afternoon and this evening, remembering our time zones, is that do these types of activities make sense in developing and sustaining interest in Baroque music? And how important is it to identify and cultivate the next generation of players and listeners?
Well, since nobody's speaking, I was looking towards YeEun for that. I think, just as a human being, it's immensely important. And it's wonderful that somebody of YeEun's age does these scholastic events. I would happily, you could count on me on any time to go out. I think it's enormously important. It's educating. It's also just presenting to young people who might not get a chance otherwise, not necessarily always from the lower economic brackets. It's just to everybody. Present what we love to do, present our music. I think it's terrifically important that they see the younger people. So again, I'm looking at YeEun, that they see people a bit nearer to their age But then Martin, myself, these others, I think it should remain important to us to go out there and say, well, look, I've spent a number of decades of my life playing this music, which I love, which brings me tremendous joy and fulfillment. And I'd like to share a bit of that with you. What do you think?
And I think that when we started to do this in Long Beach, we had one of the board members who is extremely, as an educator, connected to the local schools and everything. And I saw two aspects which were very touching. The first one were that really these little kids are coming dressed up for the first time to a concert, to a classical concert. And you could feel this excitement with their parents when we gave these tickets away for the concerts. But then we have in Musica Angelica staff, we have extreme specialists for working at schools and connecting the musicians of Musica Angelica with the schools. So I think we are equipped very well with the men and women power to do that, and we should do it, because I think, again, this is our audience from tomorrow, and then it's a really strong connection to the community, because I could not think of anything better to connect to the community than with these activities, and it's fantastic when we can continue with that.
That's great. Go ahead, please.
If I add something, yeah, of course, it is very, very important, and I love seeing kids like screaming and dancing at the same time when I play. And they have millions of questions after, and I think that is important because that's what they're going to remember for their life. And I think those experiences that I had when I was young, going like someone was coming to play something, even something little, even singing with a guitar, that like a very live memory was my motivation, to make me become what I am right now, I think. So I think that is very important, and I think we are doing a great job.
That's fantastic. Well, I do recall being sent out to a site visit with 60 kids that were in the Harmony Project. And I thought, how are they going to sit still for an hour and listen to these musicians? But they were completely mesmerized because they had taken an instrument and then they got to see the level of performance that you were bringing with the skill and the practice and the emotion. And I think and they were completely riveted. I have never sat in a room with 68 to 14-year-olds that have been that quiet for an hour. So it's a testament to the music. So thank you for that answer. So one final question for all of you this morning is that we have been doing quite a bit of work to kind of build our community of audience by hosting post-concert receptions and other kinds of activities where we can kind of build relationships with our listeners and those that wish to support us. What are your feelings about these types of events, and what do you believe works best in building a community of support while maintaining the artistic integrity of our orchestra?
It all sounds great to me. I mean, I've been in different organizations. I love that there can be a certain type of social interaction with certain members of the audience. Sometimes they're a little bit selective and refined, other times a little more wide-reaching. As an invited artist to these organizations, I think it's marvelous. But again, that would be better answered probably by Martin.
No, not. I think, again, it's the size of our group, which is very helpful for interaction, because it's easier for a small chamber orchestra, which can really send out 2 or 3 musicians to connect with some audience members, be it in a house concert or be it explaining, talking to them, than for a big symphony orchestra where 2,000 people are sitting in there. Then I running a big concert series in the Vienna Musikverein in this Golden Hall since almost 40 years. And our problem until now is that we don't have any contact with the audience, because we don't get we are invited by the concert hall to play. All the addresses belong to the concert hall. And so if we want to approach somebody personally, it's just if they come to us and talk to us, we're sitting since 20 years in your series. Can you tell us something? So I think to bridge this gap is much easier for us, and we should use the occasion. I think if you have interest in audience, and YeEun mentioned in the beginning, I think the ideal would be to start with house concerts, to offer this, and to maybe even small house concerts. If two musicians are playing in a private home, it's easier to connect than if 5 or 6 musicians are playing. Then you need already organization, you need preparation. I think this caravan idea of YeEun is genius, and we could adapt it very well in a different form to us, to have who wants to connect. And I think 2 things are important: to give each musician a face. I think I love it very much that we have all the musicians listed with a bio in our orchestra, but then again, who are the people who can connect very well to this and this audience members and so on. And I think our job is a social job, because Baroque music was either church music or opera, or it was table music where people were entertaining in big parties. And I think the social aspect should always be kept in our work. It's part of our work.
Is there, do you think, danger inherent? Because one of the things that I've encountered as the executive director of Musica Angelica is that we get asked to play different places. And we were recently asked to perform at a wedding at the San Gabriel Mission, and I declined it because I felt we're not really like a wedding band. I mean, we are an entity that performs a concert. But on the other hand, we've been invited to perform at the Long Beach Public Library in the Miller Room, and we've accepted that invitation for December to bring either a quartet or a quintet and do a piece where our musicians play. We stop down, each of them will talk about their instruments, their experiences, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. Kind of what we've been doing with the kids in our outreach to the Harmony Project in Long Beach Unified School District. But there is always that fine balance, of getting invited to play. We are planning a home concert in December at a lovely home in La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and I think that's good because it contains us. But I feel like we never want to be background music or cocktail music. No, we want you to sit and listen to this music and have the opportunity to hear it. But I like what you said about the social aspect, Martin, of the musician's life, because I feel like our audience wants to meet you guys. They want to get to know you. They want to talk to you. They love this music and they appreciate your artistry, but they just want to learn more about the music, but they also want to learn more about you. And that seems to be a big component of this as well.
Now, we had it many times. I remember several board members, so every year we gave for years, when we had this big party to raise money, there was a prize for a couple to come to Vienna to enjoy some of our concerts here. And this became a very nice custom. We made some friends here. Yeah. And I think the other thing is a labeling question, a branding question. I think where we have Musica Angelica on, it should have a certain format, a certain level, and so on. But you always can recommend musicians maybe even to play for weddings or something if they would enjoy that. Yeah. But I think the general thing would be that we have this group, and this group is very specialized, is doing a very great job, and there are many forms of connecting to the audience. And for sure, American audiences are different from European audiences. Probably, Jory, you know it too. There's much more distance here. On the other side, I see it in my countryside festival I'm doing here. It's like in America. People come up to you and want to invite you and so on. It's different. We should use it. Yeah?
Well, I have to warn you all that we have a board member that he's a retired music critic, and he suggested that we buy a bus. So this is right up YeEun's alley here, a Baroque bus, and we paint it, and that's what we transport ourselves around in. So, we might be going on a Baroque tour.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a question if you get enough invites. We had fantastic tours with Musica Angelica. We toured South America about 15 years ago, and it was an incredible experience to do. But it's a different case. You don't need a bus to do that. Yeah. But YeEun, with your experience, can tell us a lot of the caravan tour. I would love to transfer it over here in some ways. It's just but it's. I think I have to mention it right now. Having you, Matthew, here in our team brings a different level of organization to everything. Because before we had, I think here you can focus directly and can direct our bus or our wave without bus to go the right direction. I think this is very important to have the professional side really covered well and really pushing the artistic side. It's a different, I can say it's a different style since we have you aboard.
Well, thank you. Well, I do believe that the music needs to be heard. And I think, as YeEun had said, taking the music to the audience is really important. And we've been doing that, as well as bringing the audience to us, which we've been doing some of that too. But I think it's a balance of that you've got to promote and market yourself and establish a brand, but you also don't want to be playing at a cocktail party somewhere. You want to make sure it's performance, and that when we play, we are the event, because I think it deserves that. Well, this has been delightful to chat with all of you. I appreciate your patience with dealing with some of my technical difficulties here. Rain is something we never see in Southern California. So when it rains here in the summer, it wipes everything out. But
it's good for you. It's good for you.
But it's
we had a thunderstorm here. It's just the same weather.
Regular day.
And even here in France, the weather was strong enough to disturb my internet a couple of hours ago. Matthew, I was about a minute away from writing to you saying that I may have an issue. So it's funny a little bit that you have this problem. And then I thought, okay, my internet is stable enough that I can take a chance.
Well, we persevered, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much to Martin, Jory, YeEun. It's been a delight to chat with you. Can't wait to see you in person this season performing with us, and we'll look forward to that. And of course, to all of those that are watching, we welcome your interest in Musica Angelica. We still have season subscriptions and tickets available, and we'd love to have you join us this season. So thanks again to all of you. Have a terrific rest of your day. I know, YeEun, it's probably time for you to turn in. So thank you so much. Take good care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Bye-bye.